Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we're rolling along. Last week of the NBA season, got 8 games tonight with a ton of teams on back-to-back as damn near the whole league played last night. But we'll be taking a look at best bets in this one. Also have play-up props up as we do each and every weekday. So definitely continue to follow along and subscribe to that page. Also head to thelines.com and use everything that we have up on the site for you guys right now. Heavy into this NBA season as we get into these playoffs. Nate, let's jump right into your first best bet of the night.
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest game of the night is Wolves and Nuggets for the number one seed in the West here. And I will just say let's look for a close game or the Wolves to win. Plus 5.5, you can still get it. It was +6 and starting to gain some steam. But I mean, the Wolves, this is much more important to them, I think you can say, than the Nuggets, who have classically been playing the role of like, we know we're good. We're not going to go too hard at any point in the regular season. We're going to enter the playoffs healthy, and we're not that concerned about getting the number one seed in home court. Kind of like the old LeBron James Cavs used to be. Like this, just we're fine. We can win road playoff games, and everybody's been giving them their best shot though, because like all I hear in every single podcast is, can anyone beat Denver? Like Denver's just like going to cruise to the championship again. NBA teams hear this stuff too, and they're like, okay, so this is like the top dog. Like let's test ourselves. Let's see what we can do. They're 0-5 against the spread in their last 5 against Western Conference teams that are not tanking or that are in the playoffs, including that loss to Dallas. They're 0-6 if you count the Spurs as a not tanking team. Spurs, when they have Wemby out there, are at least a legitimately competitive team. So, I mean, Nuggets have not been blowing teams out, other than, getting like the Hawks and the Cavs with a rest advantage at home recently. But they're both on back-to-backs here. The Wolves, shout out Naz Reid, only playing 3 minutes, so he could be fresh for this one. Just get himself tossed, ruin our player prop. But yeah, he should be fresh. I mean, the Wolves were able to cover. I mean, they lose by 3 against Denver last month without both Rudy and Naz. And despite giving up 52% from 3, losing the rebounding battle, they let Joker get 35. But they did the strategy that lots of teams will try, but few will execute, which say like, all right, Joker will score, but we're not going to compromise our defense to try to double him or shade anybody. Like, we can just shut down your Michael Porter Jr.'s of the world. Like, Peyton Watson ain't getting us off the bench. Like, we are the best defense when we are locked in on everybody else. So I think they can kind of continue that approach, and Joker might do his thing against Rudy, as you love to remember how he torches Rudy. But I think the rest of this Wolves defense is good enough to get into a close game. The big concern is that their clutch numbers are so much worse than Denver, like miles worse when you look at the entire scope of the season. But I mean, in order to get into a clutch game, we've got to be in the range of covering already. So we're in the +5 in the final few minutes, and I'll take those chances. Minnesota is 10-3 against the spread in division games. Denver is 5-10. They've also covered in 4 of their last 5 as dogs. Denver's also been poor on 0 days rest in terms of -3 against the spread, 4-8 record, -3 points per game, that is. And I mean, when we see these teams in the playoffs, they crushed them game 1 on a rest advantage. The Nuggets did. The next 4 were relatively close, +4 net for Denver, and Ant just was getting to the line, was torching them at every opportunity, scoring efficiently. So as much as Minnesota doesn't have an answer for Joker, I mean, I don't think the Nuggets have much of an answer for Ant Edwards.
Fair. Yep. That would be one area. I mean, I think the summary of like the Timberwolves in the postseason moving forward, and as it pertains to playing this Nuggets team, especially, like, who's scoring in the clutch. That's what it comes down to. And that is a big part of what you said. And I think by the time you get to +6, you're probably in decent range of being able to buy on the Wolves. But I mean, also Cat might come back. What? Yeah, that was something that came out this morning. Cat might actually come back. That was in the last like 30 minutes that notification came out that I got. So that could happen. I don't know what that does to the chemistry, whatever, but I would only imagine that it helps. I'm going to stick in this game for 1 second. Just say I do think this game goes over 212.5, and I think you've got to take the context into account pretty strongly here in terms of both these teams playing on a back-to-back. and the fact that I do think there's a little bit less good matchups defensively for both teams. I think the offenses kind of have a little bit of an edge, let's say, over the opposing defense. As weird as that might sound to say about a T-Wolves defense, but specifically in this context for these two teams, they've both been playing up tempo a bit in the top 7, both of them, in terms of pace over their last 5 games, playing similar competition, middle of the road, pretty much a middle of the road strength of schedule for them over this time frame. But also on the no rest stuff, right? Like they've both been playing really well offensively, and when they get into these modes of playing on no rest, they do seem to go over a bit more. And they're right a little bit above 500, both of them, to the against the total on no rest. But also just their scoring goes up a bit, right? Like Minnesota on no rest is at 114 points per game and a 96.5 pace, whereas the Nuggets are up at about 98 or so, which at home is actually a little bit fast at times for them, but still 111 points per game in those situations, which isn't really impressive for them. But I would also say that for both these teams, they sat a decent amount of guys on the no rest situations on back to backs, especially guys like Jamal Murray, who should be good to go in this one, and Aaron Gordon back as well for them. So I think with the full scale of these two dudes, two teams rather, and the way that they play in Denver as well. Like I know that Minnesota might be a team that you worry about having enough guns on offense to kind of hang around. But if you look at their shooting and their ability to hit the mid range as of late, there's really if you can hit jump shots against Denver and you can at least get to the rim down low and put that pressure on Jokic. Not saying you'll tire him out, but I do think that being able to score the shots that they've been taking have been a little bit further away from the basket and they've been going in. So I don't know if I'm going to ride with that rather than worry that that's too much, right? And that there's any kind of negative regression coming because of the way that Denver's defense has been good, but against poor teams. And I think down low and above the break will be available for this Timberwolves squad.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather go over than under at this point at 212, just given the fact that you're dealing with the Joker and his ability to score in the clutch, and that the spread, or at least our expectation, is that this will be close down the stretch. I mean, with the stakes we have here, you'd rather have a 136 offensive rating from Denver guaranteeing that there's going to be some points down the stretch, and we'll see if Minnesota can respond in kind. I mean, big spot for them in terms of their internal confidence. So I will go under in Cleveland. The Memphis Grizzlies are in Cleveland. Their G League affiliate is essentially so under 213.5. Or if you feel more confident, I mean, I'm really depending on Memphis to drag this under. So their team total 96.5. Maybe you can get 97.5 as this creeps up. But yeah, they are literally just not sitting. They're not playing anybody other than Gigi Jackson and Scottie Pippen Jr. are their main offensive weapons. They are maybe borderline NBA talents. The rest of the guys are just really deep cuts. And in their last 6, they're scoring 100 a game at 95 pace. Really poor shooting splits, but the last 2 where they've played some good rim protection, 91.5 points per game at 38-27% splits. They're also on a back-to-back here. Last 3 back-to-backs, 96 against Philly, 98 against Charlotte, 100 against Portland. So 2 of those games against just dreadful, defenses against fellow G League affiliates, and they still barely crawling towards 100. They also had 88 at Orlando, the last time they faced a really great defense, I guess, but that was on extended rest. So, I mean, it's not as much the rest as it just is, are you playing a good defense? Now, I mean, Cleveland, the worry is that they've been anemic lately. They've been kind of bucksing about, right? Where it's just oh, well, maybe they'll just lose to Memphis like the Bucks did because the vibes are off and they're terrible. But I mean, this is coming back home after a 5-game road trip. This is like riding the ship. You are in the thick of this race where you could fall to 6th. You could lose out on home court in the first round, and Lord knows they need a first round playoff win after what happens last year, and on a little bit of rest too after that collapse on a back to back against the Clips. So I think they right the ship with defense since Donnie is still hobbled and it doesn't seem like their offense is going nuts. Interestingly, I mean, their defense has been worse on 2 days rest, and they're 3-7. But when they have 3 days rest, they are absolutely elite, holding opponents under 9 threes at 30%. So, I mean, they could easily shut down this Memphis team with a little bit of extra rest. I mean, at home since the All-Star break, they play at a 91.8 pace, much slower. The defensive rating is actually very high. And I mean, some of that is who have they played? And when you look at when they've played Charlotte and Minnesota, two below average deep offenses, their defensive rating is below 100. So 100 with a 91 pace, they could easily hold Memphis near 90. And they haven't been forcing turnovers lately against these teams like the Heat and the Suns, who are very good taking care of the ball. I mean, Memphis, as you would expect, very high turnover rate with these G Leaguers out there, and the second worst offensive rating in the league in their last six. So I think it's a get right spot for Cleveland's defense.
It's a good look. I mean, there's no reason to believe that Memphis's offense will really surprise this team and be able to get easy buckets, and the shooting is going to be sparse and hard to find for this Memphis squad. And going down low with both the Mobley and Allen combo probably won't work as well. Yeah, Cleveland, yeah, total enigma, honestly, with the way that, and it's a partial impact of Donnie coming in and out, right, of the lineup. But we're not really worried about the offense necessarily for Cleveland in this one, like you're saying. And we'll just go ahead and fade a Memphis team that I was thinking about. I was like, how are these young dudes going to play on back-to-backs? Do they get back-to-backs in the G League? Like, they don't get them in college. I don't know how these dudes are even going to necessarily react. You'd think they have young, fresh legs, but like, I really don't know. I would err on the side of, Cleveland being able to limit what they want to do on offense more than anything. So I'm going to close it out. And this one is, I feel really confident about this over. I took an over in that Denver, Minnesota game, but Orlando at Milwaukee, I think, is a pretty good over at 215.5. It's got bet up from 212.5, which is a wonderful number. But I still think we're in a good spot here. If you look at, everybody talks about Giannis being really, really important to their offense and their pace. And he does. He picks the pace up. Their offense is a bit worse without him, but their defense is much worse without him, notably so, right? And he's missed 6 games this season. They're 3-3 without him with 123 defensive rating, which is much higher than their season defensive rating of 115 when he plays. And when he's on the floor as well, obviously one of the top defenders, but just super important to what they do down low. And now you're talking about an Orlando team that's where they score from. They're driving to the rim. They're scoring from the paint as well, and the extended mid-range. And that's just going to be a problem without Giannis down low. They've already sort of been a little bit more vulnerable down low this year than they have in prior seasons for Milwaukee. They have a bottom 5 defensive field goal percentage once you get inside of the paint for them. So they're giving up a good amount of paint points on really high percentage. And people are they're not going into the lane quite as often, but when they get there, there's a lot more ability to score. And Orlando's not going to change how they play against this Milwaukee team. And then, it's just gonna be about Dame. This team takes on the persona of Dame so much more when Giannis is out. Their 3 points attempts go up by a couple a game, and their 3-point percentage goes up by a lot per game as well, which I'm not going to necessarily say they're a better, more efficient 3-point shooting team without Giannis because of the way but they do seem to focus on that a little bit more, and you've got a lot more pace and space with Dame being the dude as the focal point of the offense with the ball in his hands so consistently. And I'm honestly like kind of at the open, this right away opened at -1, and I do think that my initial thought was like, great, like I do think that at a pick'em you can take either of these teams, but I'd be careful to take Orlando just blindly because of the fact that Giannis missing. Like I do think they'll be able to get their points, but I think it'll be a close game down the stretch that will get above 220 here. And at that point, now you're talking about Dame time versus, right, like whatever you trust between Paolo and Franz to be the clutch. So just a word of caution in terms of just immediately assuming that, the Magic squad should ride here and ride over this Milwaukee team who's going to just be, who needs this one. They need to continue winning to make sure that they hold on to that 2 seed, especially with Cleveland playing a bad team tonight as well. So there's a lot to play for here. The thing that scares me too is Chris Middleton. Like he should be good to go, and that'll just mean some more points for him. He turned it on last night. I'd be a little bit worried about how, you win one for the Gipper yesterday with Giannis out, and you come back and you're not quite as focused on defense more than anything, to be honest, because there's going to be a lot of threes going up in this one. And I think that's how you score against this Magic defense as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take the Magic, Jamal Mosley is still 10-1, I think, at some places to win Coach of the Year. Like, if they win this game, are they getting the 2 seed? The Orlando Magic get the 2 seed, and you're not going to give this guy Coach of the Year with the talent he has at his disposal. But yeah, it's a tough travel spot for Orlando, right? Going Houston to Milwaukee on a back-to-back, and they have allowed 114.5 on back-to-backs. They've allowed much more in terms of 3-point shooting as well. Much worse rebounding team. So everything that they do that limits points from the opposition is kind of, a little bit more of a weakness here on the short rest. So I think that supports this too. I think, and with Milwaukee also on a back-to-back, I think it's a good look. Yeah.
Yeah, on the no rest situations as well, for sure. So that is all the time that we have, though, for you in this one with these best bets. Make sure to subscribe to that page. Also have our play a props video up as we do each and every weekday. So until we see you next, happy betting.